Hi, good morning. My name is Rachel Mennies. I am recording this on a very cold, snowy February morning in Chicago, Illinois. I am so grateful to the Public Poetry Project and the Pennsylvania Center for the book for choosing my poem, First Draft of the Teenage Girl, as part of its annual poster project. So I'm going to read the poem that was selected, First Draft of the Teenage Girl, and I'm going to read a few other poems as well this morning that come from a new project that came out of the work that I did from this poem. So thinking a lot about writing about gender, poems about relationships between writers, relationships between women. And so I think I'll begin with the poster poem, and I'll talk a little bit about the new project after that. So this is First Draft of the Teenage Girl. I grow a back for bearing, a mouth for preference. I want the garden green and gold and red, to tongue its nothing seeds, its shit. I want the body ambitious, to break ground for my ambitious want. I walk the body straight to hunger, then I open hunger's mouth. I put the world on my body's tongue, and soon the world flattens before me, prone. I hold the world tight between my hands, and the world, smiling, curls my palms into fists. So as it happens, from this project came another project. And the poems that I'm going to read next come from my forthcoming second book, which is called The Naomi Letters. And the Naomi Letters tells the story of the speaker and Naomi in correspondence with one another. In particular, it shows us only the poems that the speaker writes to Naomi, the woman that she loves. So they are all the titles are dates. So you'll see me mention some of these are what they call unsent drafts, which are letters that the speaker writes to Naomi, but for whatever reason chooses not to send them. Some of them that are dated are letters that we can assume went from the speaker to Naomi. So when you hear the name in here, Naomi, that's who she's writing to. These poems were written from June 2016 to June 2017 primarily. So the dates focused in that time period, so about 4 years ago now, which is wild. I'm going to read from the first half of the book, so poems from July to December of that era, and they connect to the first draft of the Teenage Girl, I think, in a really powerful way, in that I think I wrote those poems, the Teenage Girl poems, which have come from a different project, to try to get to this point where I felt like I had a sense of who this speaker was and what she wanted and understood about herself. So I see this as sort of like an organic coming next progression. But because the book is coming soon and it's something you'll actually be able to read, I wanted to focus on those poems today for the recording. So I'll begin with July 10th, 2016, and I'll go from there. Because this is a video, because you can pause or stop at any point, I think I should note that some of these poems discuss or examine suicide and suicidal ideation. The book focuses really heavily on the speaker's untreated and slowly being treated and recognized mental illness. So she's coming out of a period of intense suicidal ideation, a really difficult time. So some of these poems do mention suicide. So if that's not your bag, again, it's a video, so you can sort of just step away. And I fully recommend and endorse that if it's not for you. So I'll start, I'll read a couple, chat, you know how it goes. So, July 10th, 2016. Yesterday, Naomi, a man jumped to his death from the bridge beside my house. A runner found his body on the path 50 yards below, lying in a shape I cannot stop imagining. Does it matter that I once threw pebbles over this bridge to see how fast they'd fall? I imagined my body the size of 100 small stones, moving in unison. How I longed for the rock's silence once they reached the ground. But I could never lift both of my feet from the earth at once. Today I press my cheek to the bridge-facing window, feel the sun's heat gathering at the border of the pane. Today I watch the cut red tulips open towards the waning light. I have so much more to tell you about being alive. Unsent draft. This is one that couldn't make it off the desk. If I could keep her company in the blue bed, if I could join the assembled birds arrowed towards the greening park, if I could desire a bowerbird instead of her, I could feel migration as instinct and follow it. If I could desire a bowerbird instead of her, I could feel desire as instinct and follow it. If I didn't know her black brows move when she sleeps, as if remembering and forgetting an idea. If I didn't know she sleeps unclothed, even in winter, when the birds are gone. If she said, read to me, I would say, how? If she said, please, I would say, each female bowerbird mates only once. So some of these poems are in conversation with work by other poets, and when they appear as lines in the poem, so like when I quote or excerpt for somebody else, the poems make reference to that for the most part. They appear in italics, or I reference it in the text itself. The one I just read is a little different in that the bowerbird, I say, appears in homage to Maggie Nelson's Bowerbird from Bluets. That book is a formative book for me. It's a book that changed my life over and over every time I read it. But the bowerbird in particular, for those who haven't read the book or are not familiar with bowerbirds, are attracted to the color blue and make this gorgeous nest of blue found items to attract their mate. So that image really stayed with me. August 18th, 2016. In the light, Naomi, the body's perimeter glows. I stretched it long this morning, my knees crashing together like a tumbling wall, and remembered what you wrote to me. Do not grieve what lives beside you, ready for you to touch her. This, at least, I can show you. How carefully you loved this shape, the one I repair, then deprive with the same hands. The new bottle says 1/2 milligram per tablet, not to exceed 1 tablet per day. The uneaten peach sags in its skin next to the knives. August 23rd, 2016. In an hour, I'll head to the city garden. With Molly and Anne, I'll pull the last of the summer chard from the ground. We'll collect the final season strawberries, the scallions that grow to the size of an arm. I will reach for the highest service berry, named for death, how the tree first blooms in the spring once the soil thaws soft enough for a burial. I've learned to harvest one berry at a time, to inspect their skin before placing them on the scale with the others. This way they pop on the teeth at their sweetest, their tiny seeds floral and heady like almonds. If you want a pound of them, Naomi, I will bring you a pound. If you want the tree, I will bring you the tree. So I mentioned that I'm currently in Chicago. I'm recording this in Chicago, but I lived in Pittsburgh for almost a decade, and before that I lived in central Pennsylvania, and I'm from Philadelphia. So I'm a Pennsylvanian through and through, despite currently being located in Illinois. And that last poem, the poem was set at a community garden in Pittsburgh where I worked. And the serviceberry, I don't know, and I should have probably researched this, whether or not it is local to Western Pennsylvania or to Pennsylvania. But it's called the serviceberry, and I mentioned this in the poem, but to elaborate a little bit, because when it fruits, you can finally inter people. If a person dies in the winter in Pennsylvania, at least in the past before it started warming, you couldn't bury people in the middle of the winter because the ground was too cold. So the serviceberry is named the serviceberry because you could have your service for the people who had passed you could bury them. So I thought that was just so cool. And that was one of those things as a poet that like, I was out in the garden and my friend told me about this and I just got home and I was like, this has to get in a poem. So that's where we are with that one. I'm gonna read just a couple more. This next one does reference a poem. The poem is by Sharon Olds, and there's just a couple lines in here that in the poem are italicized that I'll sort of try to like gesture to indicate when I'm reading Olds and not myself. It's a little clearer on the page than it is when I'm reading. This is September 5th, 2016. I want to read you a poem. Pink sky in the morning, it opens. A girl's sky. When you look at me, do you see a woman who only knows how to love a man? These were the only stories read to me. This fault too is mine alone. Slowly the trees become visible and the spaces between them. This line makes me think of you, the white space in your letters. All my life, I have looked out at the world and never seen between. I clung to each tree I could touch without moving. But here you are, Naomi, and I write to you at dawn. Imagine being able to walk into the woods without fear. The black sky holds all colors close. Anything could happen. I will wait here reading for the sun to rise, to show you what it decides. So I mentioned I wrote these in 2016 over to 2017, which means that they straddled a presidential election, a very, I think, difficult presidential election for a lot of us. And this poem jumps sort of to the immediate other side of that, which is November 15th, 2016. There are a couple quotes in here from Elizabeth Bishop, and there's a quote from my mom, which opens the poem. November 15th, 2016. On the phone, my mother tells me all anxious people are fortune tellers. We must prepare ourselves, she says. When I imagine our future, Naomi, it looks like a bookshelf turned on its side. If we do decide to leave, we still have enough time left to pack the fallen books, enough time left to read each other poetry. Think of the storm roaming the sky uneasily. This is Bishop, Naomi, like a dog looking for a place to sleep in. Listen to it growling. The doctor says my anxiety is situationally extreme, but I believe it's just a good student of history. Has the first woman to escape ever been wrong? I have two more left. One is a Pittsburgh poem, which makes me, again, being Pennsylvania connected here, especially thrilled. The small deli in Pittsburgh, which may or may not still be there, like many Jewish delis, keeps a plaque in the front that they tell you every Friday when sundown is, when the Sabbath begins. So that was something that sort of started this poem for me. November 18th, 2016. Naomi, the delicatessen on Murray, keeps a placard in its window for the Hasids. It tracks the date of every Sabbath sundown, creeping earlier by the week. Our God lives closest to us in the dark, when the body and the spirit cease distinction. Why do I always forget the weather's different where you sleep? I imagine you also cold, warming your body with your hands. Beside me, the other Jewish women, the visibly devout, queue for their Shabbat ingredients. Here, the pink cow's tongue uncurls irresistibly, already smoked. Here, the animal haunches are stacked, salted, and glistening. I long for you even here, standing before deli glass on a November afternoon. What if it's my desire that lengthens the night? How the letters I write to you cool once they leave my hands. How the world holds itself so still in the frost, waiting. That actually takes me about to 15 minutes, so I will stop there. That wraps up the first section of the book anyway. It was wonderful to spend the morning with you, and I look forward to reading the other folks, the other posters, and to sharing more of my work with you, fellow Pennsylvanians, in the future. Thanks so much.